test. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us today, whether you're here in person or participating virtually for this public informational meeting of the Severe Weather Mitigation and Resiliency Advisory Council. Mr. Mays, I'm the Commissioner of Insurance for the great state of Connecticut, and we issues that we are seeking to address onset deep insurance in so many levels, but even more importantly, consumers, citizens, be protected against the change. Connecticut, like the rest of the country, is experiencing more frequent severe weather events. Through this advisory council, our goal is to develop practical and forward-thinking strategies to strengthen the resilience of homes, our businesses, and our communities. By investing in mitigation and resilience now, we can reduce losses and keep people in their homes, help businesses stay open, ease the burden on our healthcare and emergency systems. This advisory council brings together a dedicated group of experts whose hard work and expertise are essential to our mission. Their efforts will guide the development of a program designed to reduce risk, build a healthier, stronger, resilient Connecticut. Today's meeting is an especially important opportunity for all of you, our residents, stakeholders, and partners, to hear about the Council's progress. They've been doing an awful lot, and to share your perspectives. Your input is valuable in ensuring the program reflects the real needs and priorities of across the state. We need that now more than ever. I'm sure everybody's seen the news reports of various natural catastrophes across the country where the FEMA has declined to provide what we expected in terms of coverage, in terms of help for various communities. Not to say we're on our own in this together. And we need to make sure that we as a state, it is our responsibility now as a state, that we are doing everything we can to reduce the risk, reduce the cost, and to ensure that our citizens are protected against natural catastrophe, physically and economically. I want to thank the Advisory Council, commitment, their hard work. This has been a long process, which is ongoing. We're getting closer to that end, but I do have, I stand. They really have done so much. To address this issue requires a holistic approach. It means bringing in so many videos, getting so much input, trying to figure out the way. And that's what they have been doing on our behalf. I want to thank them for that. I want to thank you all for being here and for your engagement in this important. Thank you. With that, I will stop talking. That's important.
Someone talking. Bear with that. Good morning, and welcome, as Commissioner Mays has said, to the Weather Mitigation and Resiliency Advisory Council's second public meeting. I'm Sonia Larkin-Thorne, co-chair of the Advisory Council, here with my co-chair, Rob Hopsinger. Other members attending with us today, George Bratner, Joanna Wozniak-Brown, Joe Matthews, Eric Nelson, Jim Parrish. Representing Brian Garcia and the Green Bank, Lee Waltington, and representing James O'Donnell and Yukon, John Trusninsky. There are a number of members who were unable to join us this morning: Matt Wolf, Richard Brannigan, James O'Donnell, and Brian Garcia physically. As the commissioner said earlier, we were appointed by Commissioner Mays in October of 2024. Our mission is before you on the board, and that is the goal that we have all been working toward. The agenda for today's meeting is posted. Is before you. We're going to have a very interesting conversation with some wonderful individuals who have worked closely with us over the last 6 months. It's an overview of the Alabama Strengthening Alabama Homes program by Brian Powell from the National Association of Insurance Commissioners. Our council members and the subgroup leaders will provide an update on the program design, financing and funding, and education and communications. We will have presentations by Susan Anmus, Senior Vice President from the National Association of Home Builders, and John Basso from the American Red Cross. Then we will open the session up for public comments. Rob, would you like to make a few comments before we begin?
Yeah, good morning, everybody. Glad we could assemble. And again, thank you to Commissioner Mays for putting together this terrific council. I appreciate, again, thank you to all of our council members and all of the others who've contributed time and focus on this such an important issue. We just want to make one comment that there's one adjustment. You'll see here, closing remarks by Commissioner Mays. He gave opening remarks because he has to leave early. So my co-chair Sonia and I will be making some closing comments. So on that note, I will switch it back and we can go to the overview.
Providing a quick video to give you some content of how we're working. This is Connecticut flooding in 1955. Over 1 week, 2 hurricanes, Hurricane Connie and Hurricane Diane, hit Connecticut, causing severe flooding, loss of life, and an estimate of more than $350 million in 1955 figures of losses across the state. The Farmington River raised over 18 inches. The towns of Farmington, Avon, Unionville, East Granby were impacted. These are inlet towns. These are suburban towns. These are not coastal towns that were impacted. Non-coastal towns and cities across Connecticut have experienced and struggled with major flooding like we saw in August 1904. Slide's not moving. And these towns have struggled with flooding like we've never seen before. As you can see from this, people were rescued in boats at that time by first responders, and the damage was horrific. Recently, we've seen flooding caused not by hurricanes visiting Connecticut, but caused by severe rain events. In Connecticut, we saw major flooding in the towns of Oxford and Southbury. Again, I want to emphasize, this flooding was not caused by hurricanes, but caused by significant rain events that occurred in a short period of time. The city of Hartford saw severe basement floodings impacting homes and small businesses in 2021. We've seen microburst in Simsbury, Connecticut, flipping planes and bringing down, causing significant trees to come down and housing damage. And again, another issue of not a hurricane, but when a half an hour microburst caused this type of damage in Simsbury, Connecticut. In Oxford and Southbury, again, another rain event. Streams turned into major rivers, causing housing to fail. Town infrastructures were destroyed during this event, or these events in these two cities. What we have come to realize now is that rain is our biggest nemesis, not just hurricanes, rain and wind in Connecticut. Again, non-hurricane events. The towns impacted are not coastal towns, but towns who normally would not expect to experience this type of significant damage. We've seen in the town of West Hartford significant flooding events that have occurred, causing significant damage to small business owners and again homeowners. To address these types of events, this is why Commissioner Mays created the Advisory Council to help us help the residents of Connecticut understand what resiliency and mitigation will do if they are educated, what we can do to address flooding in the state. We know now that 90% of the flooding damage occurs outside of the federal emergency management designated flood plains, but it occurs in neighborhoods, in towns that consumers think, oh, I don't need a flood policy because I'm safe. So our goal today is to look at what's happened in this state historically and help consumers plan for their future.
So what we'd like to do now is,
George. Brian.
first. So what we'd like to do now is introduce our first speaker, Brian Powell. He is the Catastrophe Risk Mitigation Specialist at the National Association of Insurance Commissioners, NAIC. Just quick comments about Brian. We've personally met with him, and he's met with a number of our subgroups, and he's been fantastic and very gracious with this time. He serves as the Deputy Insurance Commissioner and Director of the Office of Risk and Resilience, and has been with the Alabama Department of Insurance since 2006. So there's a lot of great things to say about him. He was a leader on the Strengthen Alabama Homes program, a nationally recognized grant program, which is located within that Office of Risk and Resiliency. That program issues grants up to $10,000 to Alabama homeowners to mitigate their homes to the Insurance Institute for Business and Home Safety's fortified standards, hardening them against severe storms. The Strengthen Alabama Homes program is a springboard for the fortified program in the United States and is the model program other states are adopting and have been adopting to lessen the risk of loss and ensure a healthy local insurance market. So again, I'd love to welcome Brian. I believe he's remote, and he's going to be giving a great presentation. Thank you, Brian.
Brian is going to be presenting his slides in just a moment. Until those come up, please bear with us as we are trying to get his audio connection established. Thank you for your patience.
What we can do then is, due to technical difficulties, we will just reorder on the fly. You gotta love it. This is why we do it live, right? So what we'll do is we'll move to our advisory council subgroup activities. And then once Brian gets established with his audio, we could flip back. So what we have up first is our good friend and colleague, George Bradner. He's going to go over program design and what the subgroups activities have been thus far. Thanks.
Thank you very much. It's working great. We've been working for several months now, and I want to thank my co-chair Matt Hoverath-Wolf and my working group members Eric Nelson, James O'Donnell, Lee Walton, and Sonia Larkinthorne for the work that we have before you. In designing our program for Connecticut, we leverage existing resources and best practices from the organizations like the National Association of Insurance Commissioners, NAIC, and within that, CIPR, the Center for Insurance Policy Research. We've also worked with FLASH, the Federal Alliance for Safe Homes, and IBHS, the Institute for Business and Home Safety. And lastly, and not least, though, Smart Homes America, who all helped us, look at the design components of our program. We really followed the blueprint established by Alabama, but I would like to say that there are over 12 states that have currently have in place legislation to create the program or are looking at legislation to create a program within their jurisdictions. And also in the Northeast, Maine, New Hampshire, and Rhode Island are all looking at some form of resiliency program. I believe Rhode Island's is already in legislation. Maine and New Hampshire are working in this same direction. And I will go to the next slide, please. The key elements for our program, there are two, and Sonia laid that out with her introduction. The main part of the program and the initial part of the program will be focused on fortified roof, wind resiliency. There's a lot of research and work done in this area through the IBHS and the organizations I named earlier. And we are leveraging that work and plan to have this be the first phase of our program for the state of Connecticut. Part of the phase will also include communication and an education program with a greater focus on flood awareness, trying to help consumers understand what their flood risk is and that they are at risk and that they need to understand what their risk is and what they can do to prevent or, get insurance that can help mitigate that risk. And as I said, the main part of the program will be a wind mitigation program, but there will be a tremendous education and communication around this as well. Next slide. The Fortified program will be really focusing on wind resiliency, as I indicated, reinforcing the roof deck, sealing the roof deck, ensuring the proper drip edge insulation, and ensuring the envelope. One of the things that was learned after several hurricanes in the regions in the south is that the garage doors are a key component to helping ensure the envelope of a dwelling, and the roof is the next and most important. Ensuring the roof and the envelope of the roof helps prevent significant damage to the property. Next slide. We're going to be looking at funding, and Lee will be talking to the funding and financing, Lee and Rob. And what we're looking at initially is grant amounts or funding amounts up to $10,000 to $15,000. Eligibility for a primary insured single-family homeowner, owner-occupied rental properties 1 to 4 family. Other considerations we're looking at is, assistance with tree removal in areas where that is necessary. Another portion of the program that we're looking at is how can we help small business owners with their fortifying their properties. Geographic considerations and a community-centric program trying to work closely with COGS, councils of government around the state to help them identify disaster-prone areas for wind and water. And we're going to look at establishing an initial pilot program. Next slide, please. We're looking at a verification process, so it will create a new home evaluators that will go out and visit properties and help the homeowner evaluate what their risk is and what they need to do to mitigate that risk, and then coordinate with home builders and contractors that are certified in IBHS fortified standards that can help do the construction that is necessary to fortify that individual's roof. There's also an important element with the private market incentives, with insurers providing discount, mortgage companies providing incentives, along with realtors providing incentives and awareness of the importance of a fortified home. Next slide. We're also been working with on legislation with the governor's office, SB 9. And this is the flood portion of what we're trying to do in Connecticut in phase 1, informing the consumer at the time of purchase necessity for flood insurance. We hear far too often, I didn't know I was in a flood zone. I didn't know I had a flood risk. I was told I didn't need insurance. So we want to provide much more awareness, and this bill is going to help do that with mortgage companies and lenders and realtors, providing notification to the individual purchasing a home of the importance of purchasing flood insurance and what their risk is. Notice on all insurance policies that will go out that will provide notice that there is no flood coverage in your homeowner policy. And we're working with producers to make sure that they're notifying consumers of the importance of purchasing flood. The initial program will emphasize communication and education. Statewide communication initiatives will inform residents of their risk of flood. If it rains, you can flood. And the availability of flood insurance through public and private entities. Next slide. Flood resilience future. We want to, the next phase of a flood program will take place after we've established the wind resiliency fortified program and have learned what we need to do to run an effective program. We then want to build on a flood program for Connecticut that will work with the governments and COGS, as I indicated earlier, and municipalities to help inform their residents of what their flood risk is. Once the fortified program is established, look into expanding the fortified program to include a flood resiliency mitigation. We need to identify meaningful cost-benefit measures that will help protect properties from flood, work with organizations like FM Global and other organizations to identify these effective flood protective measures, and establish a task force to develop standards for practical property-level flood risk reduction retrofit strategies. That's what we're working on, and we'll turn it over to the next group.
Thanks a lot, George, for that presentation from the program design group. It's really important work. What I'll be doing is presenting the financing and funding working group. We like to call it FinFu WG. You know, it's a fun name, but basically it's financing funding. So next slide, please. All right. So first, we want to share our methodology, our approach to how we're going about with direction from the program design, which you just heard from George, on finding those financing and funding options. So first and foremost was data-driven decision-making. What we mean is by that is we're placing a strong emphasis on collecting and analyzing accurate data to inform our decisions. This includes gathering detailed information on uninsured and underinsured populations, understanding the financial scope of risks, and assessing the impact of various funding and financing sources. So the group continuously updates and refines this data. We've been reaching out to our partners who've been fantastic in providing some information, as well as other state agencies, by the way. So it's not just Connecticut Insurance Department. We've met with numerous other organizations, including DECD, DEEP, as well as others. And so what we want to do is incorporate new layers such as single family data and using as most recent data as we can to inform that decision-making process. The next two I'll just fly through. We have a comprehensive stakeholder engagement. As I just mentioned, we work with some other state agencies, but we've also met with other states and heard from them. Naturally, which you'll hear later in a little bit from Brian Powell at NEIC, we also spoke with them, and one of our council members is the CEO of Greenbank, Brian Garcia, and we have Lee here in his place. So clear communication education, as you just heard as well from the prior conversation, a prior subgroup presentation, that's really important to our residences and our small businesses. We need to have prioritize that clear communication using statutory definitions in some cases. In other cases, you know, we could try to expand those, but the main point is we want to avoid misinterpretations. The group is also focusing on educating consumers, small business owners, builders, and roofers about resiliency and fortified standards, and emphasizing the financial benefits of resilience, such as lower cost of capital and higher returns. Next slide, please. All right, so what we know. As we stated before, we've been focusing a lot on single-family, owner-occupied residential properties. You'll see here what we've uncovered thus far: incremental cost of fortified roofs, and this is really exciting, actually. You know, upgrading a residential roof. So the average roof in Connecticut, as we understand, is somewhere between $10,000 to $15,000 for a new roof. But the incremental cost to make it fortified, from what we found, and you'll see here this on the slide, is about $1,000 to $3,000 for a 2,000 square foot home. That's really not that more money in order to get the benefit of fortified. So that's one of the things that was really exciting in terms of the data that we found. Market size, we've discovered using the grand list, and thanks to our partners at OPM, approximately 930,000 owner-occupied homes assessed at $260 billion. Of which 833,000 are insured, leaving around 97,000 that are uninsured, or about 10%. The premiums paid are about $1.8 billion, providing $648 billion in coverage, and that's really fantastic. The last two here, uninsured properties, underinsured. So what we're talking about here is the incremental cost of fortified for single-family property. All right, so that's what we mean by underinsured. We want to see what we can do in order to get you from a normal roof to a fortified roof. And so that's what an underinsured property from our definition is from this context. All right. So if you were to use those prior numbers on market size, that would equate to about 1.86 billion in investment is needed in rooftops of owner-occupied single-family properties in Connecticut to increase resilience against extreme weather, specifically wind. Now, from a program design perspective, we're seeking to target vulnerable communities with focus on coastal and inland geographies identified by the program design working group. Next slide, please. Okay. What else do we know? Well, these are really recommendations for consideration. All right. We're still going through the process. We're still here to listen. But some of the key things we've been looking at is what are other states doing? What are other organizations recommending? So from a taxes and fees perspective, we've been exploring the use of best practice tax revenues, including exemptions and application fee structures that other states are taking advantage of. Additionally, discounts. We want to replicate insurance discounts for policyholders that increase the resiliency of their properties. Again, as George mentioned, there are plenty of states who have either implemented or considering implementing discounts. Savings accounts. We understand there's actually some legislation going through in the cycle, but we'll see what happens. But the savings accounts, assessing the viability of those tax-free savings accounts for catastrophes is one of our considerations. Collaborations. As we mentioned earlier, we're working across agencies to ensure that resilience investments are incorporating to fundings. And in fact, we had an incredible conversation with the Department of Housing, as well as, again, we mentioned this earlier, Green Bank with their Smarty Loan program. So those collaborations are key in terms of making a holistic approach, as we heard from the commissioner. Lastly, codes. Naturally, other states have looked at this. We'll be no different. We're just looking at how do we transform markets beyond voluntary actions, e.g. Fortified, and towards improved codes. Next slide, please. So let's talk about what we don't know yet. We have, I'll say, dipped our toes into small business. We spoke with DECD. We spoke with WBDC on the emergency funding program they had for Oxford. But what we realized is that there's a lot more information and data we need to aggregate for small business. You'll see here what we're looking to do is get accurate data on insured versus uninsured small businesses. We're looking for the assessment of financial impact. We're looking to identify vulnerable small businesses which may or may not be in the same areas as residences. We're looking for funding and financing options, which again may not be the same. Maybe they are similar. And what are the education outreach strategies that will be most effective for small businesses? Next slide, please. All right, so what's next for our group? What we're going to do is dig deeper into small business. As you just saw, there's a lot we don't know. We'll continue to assess the small business sector. That's the first thing. Second, we're going to finalize data collection analysis. We're going to ensure comprehensiveness and accurate data for residential single-family and multifamily properties, as well as small businesses. Lastly, and this is coming up close, so by next month, we're already in May, we have to put together our findings and recommendations. So we're going to finalize the working group's findings and recommendations for resilience funding and financing for the council's consideration. So I think that ends my presentation, and yep, then we'll switch it over to Sonia.
The next group is our Education and Communications subgroup, an extremely important group of individuals who are going to have the task of reaching out to Connecticut residents and renters to educate them about not only our program, but also the need to educate them regarding flood risk and what's going on and whether or not they're in a flood zone and how to buy a private or public flood policy. It's critical that we develop and identify and design a program that works for the residents of Connecticut so they know what's available to them and what's going on. Joe?
Thank you, Sonia. So you've just heard from George and Rob all the great work that's been done to design, create, and fund a program that's going to really provide some vast benefits for Connecticut residents. But for Connecticut residents for that program to be successful, Connecticut residents need to know about it, as do others, as do the contractors and evaluators who participate in that program and the public officials who will need to support it. So to that end, as Sonia mentioned, we've developed a a group that's really been focused on putting together a comprehensive communication and education plan to make sure that the various stakeholders in this process are aware of the program and how it works. And so in that regard, I'd thank Jim Paris, Jim O'Donnell, Richard Brannigan, and Sonia and George, who have all helped us advance the work in that area. So on the slide, as we approach this work, strategically, there were some guiding principles that we helped direct and influence our viewpoints. The first of those is we really need to use a wide variety of communication channels to make sure that we're meeting the different stakeholder groups in a way that meets their needs, to meet them where they are, so to speak. Second was to make sure that we're not reinventing the wheel. This is a theme that's come up numerous times, and it comes out of the fact that there are a number of states that have programs that are similar to this, that have walked this walk. There are also community and nonprofit organizations that have done a lot of work in this area. So our intent is to make sure we're maximizing our use of the materials they've prepared in other states, and particularly those things that have been successful for them. And the last is a similar concept, but there's an infrastructure that already exists in our federal, state, and local governments around resiliency, around disaster preparedness, and we see the potential for using some of those existing resources, whether they be written materials or websites or links, to connect into those. So as consumers are looking for information about disasters and resiliency, that they'll be able to be directed towards this new program. Next slide. So as we approach this work, a lot of conversations, to in-depth conversations about how to best publicize this program. I'm looking forward to sharing some of the highlights of that. And what we tried to do today is focus in on three things. So one, who are the stakeholders that we need to communicate to? Second is the what are the key themes? What are the key messages we want those stakeholders to receive? And then the last is the how. What are the communication channels that we expect to leverage in order to get that messaging to those stakeholders? So as far as the who is concerned, who is it really important that we make aware of this program as we build it and roll it out? At the top of the list, you see public officials. So very important, especially in the early stages, to get the support of our public officials at all levels in order to successfully launch the program and then continue to support it as it rolls out. Hopefully over the long term, it expands as well. And then the eligible participant group. So we, as part of the design team, there will be groups that will be focusing on to try to make them aware of the benefits. So it's very important that we have a communication campaign that gets to those people and helps them understand the benefits of the program and how to get involved. Equally important is contractors and evaluators. So the folks that are actually going to be doing the work and assessing the homes and residences and small businesses need to be aware of the program, aware of certification requirements, and frankly also aware of the role that they can play in publicizing the benefits of the program as they're out and about doing their jobs, doing roofing work. There'll be a nice source of information for residents about the program and its benefits. And then you can see some other really important groups as well, as I mentioned, municipal and government officials, building officials, town engineers, folks from the insurance industry, everywhere, that could be agents and insurance company representatives relative to the potential benefits of premium relief if, based on the fact that these roofs are more resilient and present less of a risk of loss. And then certainly the various entities that are involved in lending, mortgages, and that sort of thing, will be a direct linkage to the community of folks that are either buying properties that have existing roofs or building new properties. Again, a good source of information about the program. So that's the who. As far as the messages to be communicated, the what, Let's start out with just the benefits of the program. And so George talked a little bit about the importance of resiliency, and we certainly just all witnessed the video of what can happen in Connecticut, and literally saw a picture of a house floating down what was a stream and that turned into a river. So communicating to our residents the importance of doing these types of things so that they can survive a storm and stay in their houses after it comes through. Just a really important and perhaps the most important message that we could communicate. And then, of course, you will need to communicate the logistics of the program. So that would include who's eligible, how do you get involved, how do you get engaged, and that's important not only for the participants but also for the contractor groups and the evaluator groups who will participate in terms of actually doing the work. George went over a little bit what the fortified roof even means, and that there's technical elements to that advanced by the IBHS. So educating the public on what those technical things are, and why does it make sense to do flashing and some of the various things that the technical specifications call for. I mentioned insurance, and there's a lot of other items up here in terms of messages that we'll want to get across through the various means we've got available to us. The one other one that I would emphasize is the flood issue. So George mentioned this, and Sonia did as well, but while the initial rollout of this program isn't contemplating funding or for flood prevention, there's certainly a great linkage between the fortified roofs that we're talking about, resiliency concepts that also include flood awareness, and that's principally just things like being aware of whether you're in a flood zone or not, and whether that flood zone mapping is accurate. And certainly from a mitigation standpoint, the availability of things like flood insurance to help mitigate a loss should you be in a vulnerable position. So that would be contemplated in our education plan. And the next slide is, again, going back to the who, the what, and these are the communication channels that we would contemplate. We'd start with really a website. This would be probably the central hub of communication around what the program is and how to get involved. We've viewed some other states that have set up a central portal. I think that becomes a very important thing for not only a resident to become aware of all the information that's out there about resiliency and about fortified, but also becomes their access point, and also the access point potentially for contractors, evaluators, and the program administrators to administer the program. And what you would want to build around that is a public awareness campaign that's, as I mentioned earlier, very broad and designed to get at a lot of, to reach a lot of different groups. So that would include print media. Not everybody is digitally astute, so we would want to make sure that we're putting materials out into places like libraries or senior centers to make sure that we're hitting cohorts of folks that might not be on their phones all the time. Also, certainly the digital aspect, social media, press releases, and engaging local media outlets as we make progress and launch aspects of the program. And then I also had mentioned earlier that there is an existing infrastructure. So there's outfits like FEMA and IBHS and Flash that can also help serve spreading the word of these programs. So we will look to take advantage of those types of elements. And then the last thing I would mention, and something that the council has talked a lot about, is we want to make sure that the messaging is tailored to the audience. And so Connecticut is a multilingual state, and we want to make sure that we're reaching out and developing materials that are multilingual and hit the various populations that need to be aware of the program. So as I mentioned, I'm not going to go through all of these, but just this slide reinforces the wealth of information that is out there from other organizations that we see we can, in the state of Connecticut, take advantage of. to help build out the education program. So NAIC, Flash, IBHS, we're going to hear from Brian Powell on Alabama and how they go about publicizing their program. So just a lot of already ready-made materials that we'll be able to take advantage of as we seek to publicize the program. And just two quick examples on the next slide. I had mentioned a web portal. This is a web portal from the state of Louisiana, and you can see up across the top, I would allow residents and people interested in the program to get lots of different types of information about the program, educate themselves, and then if they do want to participate, one of the things I like about this particular site is on the left side, you can access the grant program when those funds become available. You come in through the left side of the page, and it puts you into the process of applying for a grant and hopefully getting connected with a contractor, et cetera. But it also has optionality for those, perhaps the grants are done for the year, or a person that's not eligible. It provides an outlet for those who might be interested in self-funding the project to get in touch with a certified contractor who can do the work for them, and they can also educate themselves on the fortified standards and that sort of thing. So I would see that Connecticut would develop something along the same lines, but we've got a lot of different examples to build off of. And then the next slide is just another set of visual. I had mentioned this wealth of information that's available for us to make use of. Flash is a terrific organization that is really dialed in on these efforts, resiliency and disaster mitigation broadly, but certainly Strong Homes is a big piece of their message. And you can see there they have things available, ready-made for consumers to educate themselves on hurricanes, on how to buy a resilient home, what to look for, a guide to insurance that talks about how homeowners insurance works, and I'm sure points out the lack of flood coverage in a homeowner's insurance policy. And then on the right side of the page, a lot of handy practical collateral for residents to use to determine whether they're prepared to deal with the various types of disasters that can affect the state. So we're very encouraged that, again, there's a lot of work that's been done in this area by other states and other groups that will help us along our way.
Thank you, Joe. And as you can see, a lot of effort has been put in to doing the work of educating consumers here and looking at what other states have done, but also a lot of work done by all three of our subgroups and the efforts that the individual members of the advisory council have done to make sure that we build a program that will definitely serve the needs of the residents of Connecticut. Our next speaker and presenter is Brian Powell from the NAIC. He's a catastrophe risk mitigation specialist. So, Brian, welcome.
Thank you. Can you guys hear me?
We can hear you a little.
A little? Okay, sorry. I'm having some technical issues with sound this morning, so I apologize. I'm going to attempt to share my screen. Are you guys seeing the slideshow?
We can see it, Brian. Is there any way that you could turn your volume up further or speak closer to the mic?
Yeah, I'm actually on my phone here, trying to hold it and work the slideshow here. So let me try something here. How is that? Can you see the slideshow a little better now?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so thank you for allowing me to speak this morning. Again, I'm Brian Powell with the NAIC. I work in an area of the NAIC that's basically kind of like a think tank. It's known as the CIPR, or the Center for Insurance Policy and Research. Within the CIPR, there's another organization that we have that addresses the needs of commissioners and department staff when it comes to mitigation and supporting the programs from a research and policy perspective. I apologize. I did hear the opening remarks by Commissioner Mays and the other presentations because of the technical issues. But just kind of a brief overview before I dive into the mitigation programs, and I will. My intent is to talk about kind of broadly what we're seeing across the country, so that you have an idea of the magnitude of work that's being done in this space, but then also focus in on Alabama. A little bit about my background. I retired from the state of Alabama as Deputy Insurance Commissioner, but for the last probably 10 to 12 years of my career there, I was heavily involved with the Strengthen Alabama Homes program, which is really the model program for states to follow when they establish these mitigation programs. There, I created the design of the program, implemented it, and ran it for over a decade. So I really wanted to take that knowledge and experience to a broader stage. So that's why I'm with the NAIC, and that's this one. And I'm one of the resources that Connecticut has to work on the establishment of their program. Just kind of a brief overview of the NAIC. I'm sure most of us know what it is. It basically is a organization that's been around for quite a while that provides expertise and data analysis for insurance commissioners to effectively regulate their industry, protect consumers, and again, we have resources that can assist states to establish these mitigation programs. Looking at the Resilience Hub, now this is within the CIPR of the NAIC. We do direct engagement. We work directly with insurance commissioners and their staff to provide resources to establish these programs. We do a lot of advocacy across the country for mitigation and resilience. And we also have tools within our organization that can help insurance commissioners determine things that they need to know in order to stand these programs up and make them successful. So an example of that would be, where should you launch this program? Where do you place it within your state as far as the groundwork goes to get basically the biggest bang for your buck? So where are you going to have your largest return on investment once you launch the programs? We bring to the table partnerships. And we share those partnerships with departments of insurance. The previous presentation mentioned Flash, the Federal Alliance of Safe Homes. Well, that's one of our partners, and we've been working with Leslie and Flash I've been working with them for about 15 years. So we have these well-seasoned, well-developed relationships with entities across the country that we can bring in for different reasons, whether it's for communication or actually messaging, or whether it's for technical support. We have a really strong relationship with the University of Alabama. They've developed a platform for managing these programs. So we have a number of partnerships that we can bring to the table on this. Community of practice, that's really where the benefit of having this coordinating team comes into play from the NAIC's perspective, because it allows us to create a consistent way to approach the design and implementation of these programs. And there's a consistent approach that's needed and expected by the partnership. So by IBHS, by insurance companies, there's a level of consistency that they want to see across the country with all these programs, and we're able to coordinate that through this engagement team and bring that to the market. We also do a lot of innovative work. We look at emerging technologies. There are things that are emerging, such as AI.
Brian, can you hear me? Do you mean to advance the slides?
Yes, I will.
Okay.
Are they advancing? Can you see them?
No, they're not advancing.
My goodness, I'm having some real technical issues this morning. Okay. All right. Well, I'll just, let's see, stop sharing and I'll keep going. Can you see it now?
It's working. Well, it was there.
Try it one more time. If not, I'll just keep going without. Can you see it now?
No.
Yes?
No, we cannot.
No, you cannot. Okay. All right. I'll just let me close out this sharing. While we're having some issues this morning, and I'll just continue
It looks
on.
like you stopped sharing your screen.
Yeah, I did the share and then tried to pull up the slideshow, and it's showing on my end, but it's not doing anything, I guess, for you guys. Let's try this.
Brian,
one more
can
time
you just share your screen?
That's what I'm doing. Yes. Is it showing? It's showing that it's sharing on my end. Can you see a slideshow? Can you see the first slide that says Resilience Hub?
It was there originally, but now it's disappeared.
Oh goodness. Okay. All right. Let's try this. All right. Well, I apologize, but for some reason I'm having some real technical issues this morning. Not sure why. I was on a call earlier and it was working. Yeah, I apologize.
Brian, this is Jared. Could you? I'm going off script here. Can you email your slides to Mary? You have her contact information.
Yeah, I can do that.
Is that a yes or a no?
That's a yes.
Okay.
Why don't you go ahead, Brian, and then once we get the slides up, we'll let you know.
Okay, email is sent. So let me get back to this. Okay, so Mary should have the slideshow. All right, so I'll just continue here. So as I was saying, with the consistency of approach, it's important to do this, and it's really being asked by the industry that we do have some level of consistency in the way that the programs are designed, the way they're rolled out, so that the industry can react to it in a real organized fashion. Just to give you an idea of the magnitude of the work that's going on in establishing these wind mitigation programs, and I have a slide. Hopefully, Mary can pull it up here in just a few minutes. But I just show a listing of all the states that have existing operational programs within a Department of Insurance, and then also outside of departments of insurance. But the key thing that I wanted to show, and hopefully the slide can come up pretty soon, is that the uptake of these mitigation programs across the country this past year has been absolutely incredible. We've had 4 states in the country formulate and pass legislation, so they have authority to stand up these programs. But we have another number of states that are working on legislation. So we're going to wind up with, I would say by the end of next year, we'll have at least 12 to 13 states across the country that have adopted these mitigation programs and are moving forward to building some level of resilience. The intent of these programs is really to create a platform for change. We saw this in Alabama, and this is where I'll start tying Alabama into the presentation, where we wanted to change the behavior of residents and basically empower them to make informed decisions about like protection options for their homes against severe winds. Once we started doing that, we started seeing residents, and because of a lot of the messaging that we did, or the communications that we did, that we started seeing the residents making decisions even beyond just fortification of their home or doing mitigation work. We started seeing them really dive into insurance and doing some things to create some competitiveness between companies in the state. And then we really started seeing a big movement too in Alabama to move building codes to require whenever there was a roof replacement or a home was being built, that there were these resilience measures put in or mitigation measures put into the building of those homes. And through the change in the building codes, then we also started seeing this resilient housing stock in levels of concentration like I don't think we had seen across the country. In Alabama, it's a little bit different than it is in Connecticut in that when neighborhoods are built here, they're built, maybe 100 or 200 homes at a time. And that can be significant when you have 3 or 4 or 5 developments like that in close proximity with each other, and all of those homes are mitigated to the highest standards. So we start seeing these high levels of concentration of homes being built, and so those areas are prime areas for best risk for insurers. And then we started seeing that kind of build its own culture and taking on, and we call that a culture of resiliency. And because of that, we started seeing this trajectory of property insurance. The rates go down, more companies coming in, competing with each other, and we started seeing a much healthier market.
What slide are you on now? We got your deck.
Yeah, go one more slide. Okay, there, and then let's go to the next one. All right, perfect. All right, so just to kind of give an idea of kind of the milestones that you should expect when these programs are established. Your state legislature typically has to enact a law that will establish or give authority to an entity like a Department of Insurance to establish a mitigation program. And what it'll do is it'll have several parts to it. We'll have to have a standard, and most states are using the IBHS standard for wind. And hurricane and hail or severe convective storm. And then also typically there's some authority given to establish some type of a treasury account or some place to place the money. And then there's legislation around how the money is to be used. From that, then we'll see the commissioner create some rules or some regulation around the operational of the program. And that's where the CIPR really comes in, or the resilience hub rather really comes in. To help establish those things, to establish the legislation, and then to establish the operational pieces of the program, and then go into establishing the rules and regulations around the operation. These programs, just like in Alabama, they cross multiple state agencies, or there are different agencies involved with different aspects of it. And really, that's a good thing as a check and balance on the operation of the program, because it also allows for not just protection to the, say, the Department of Insurance, but also to consumers. We'll see pilot programs fielded. Very important to do that, to work out the processes and expectations of the program, but also there's a lot of assistance, as I mentioned before, with where your ROI maps or your maps and resources that the CIPR can provide to really make you understand or give you an idea of where you can invest those monies to get the biggest bang for your buck. I think it was mentioned in the previous slide or previous presentation that we're seeing grants average somewhere between $10,000 and $15,000. And that's total cost to mitigate homes to the fortified standard. Obviously, there will be homes that will exceed that cost. And one thing that we're working on and have been working on is to work with local banks and with the banking system to help provide some revenue streams or products that perhaps a homeowner could use to kind of bridge the gap between the cost of the total cost of the mitigation and the grant amount. So we're just seeing a lot of these products develop. And in Alabama, we saw them specifically with partnerships with the Federal Home Loan Bank System, where we had Community Reinvestment Act funds that were transferred through member banks to the Strengthen Alabama Homes program, and we were able to deliver that money to kind of help bridge the gap, especially for the low to moderate income community. This was a lifesaver for them, and really changed the direction that those homeowners went in. Next slide, please. As I mentioned, through funding partners like Federal Home Loan Bank, we see revenue streams come in. We also, there's also the option for direct donations. those were donations like philanthropic donations. Strengthen Alabama Homes did see some of those. But the majority of the funding that came through the Strengthen Alabama Homes program came from the insurance industry into the Department of Insurance as a portion of like retained fees that are collected by the department. Some other fees that the department collects will be something like maybe a licensing fee. So there's a portion of that can be designated to fund these programs. The nice thing about this is that it avoids like an additional tax burden on the taxpayer. So you don't have an additional tax imposed upon them. Usually when you go through this type of funding stream, and also it doesn't come out of the state's general budget. So it's kind of like a self-funded program. But that's what we did in Alabama, and we're seeing that happen in states across the country that have the means to be able to do this. Another very effective way to fund it is through things like matching funds through public-private partnerships. But that's something that will have to be explored a little bit more in Alabama. We were able to do that because of the large manufacturing facilities that are in the state. Those funds that were donated or not donated, well, they were donated, but they were used as part of the cost of mitigation were really for like employees that were, I guess, could really affect their continuity of operation plans when we have like hurricanes come through the state. We have to have employees go back and make sure the facilities are back up and running and do the repairs and things so that they can get back into operation. So what they wanted to do, those companies wanted to issue money, in conjunction with our grant to mitigate those homes so that those employees could either stay and weather the storm or they could come back shortly after and still have a place to live. So next slide. Let's see here. So let's talk about eligibility requirements and what we're seeing across the country. It's typically the residents that own the property that live there. So that has to be your primary residence. We're seeing that as kind of a typical first cut on eligibility requirements. Condominiums and mobile homes are not. They don't qualify for the fortified program. Condominiums can, but that's a much larger project, and mobile homes are just not stable enough because of their foundational issues. So they don't qualify for the fortified program. So they're typically just removed from eligibility on the grant programs. Home must be in good repair. The home must be in a condition that it can be mitigated. And typically through the process of these programs, that repair pieces or good repair pieces identified. And if it's not in good repair, then they address the homeowner with that so they can make those repairs. Insurance is typically required. Wind insurance is typically required, especially in the hurricane-prone areas. That's a big deal because, as I'll talk about in a few minutes on incentives, how those incentives that were put in place by these mitigation programs impact that wind insurance premium. Flood insurance is a typical thing to have, whether it's through the NFIP or it's through a private policy. It's usually a requirement if it's in a special flood hazard area. And then the home evaluation must happen through a certified fortified evaluator because that is a check and balance on the entire process. And those folks are typically engaged by the homeowner. See, next slide. I won't touch on fortified too heavily because I think we're pretty familiar with it. But they do have different programs for high wind, hail, and hurricanes, and also wildfire. And we're seeing all of those being employed across the country at this point. They train their contractors and they also train their evaluators. And so we have certified people that can work on these programs. There's never been a shortage of contractors and evaluators in a state. I've worked on probably 12 or 14 of these programs, and that's something that always seems to be a concern up front, but inevitably there's always a waiting list toward the end of it. Because of the way the Fortified program is designed, that third-party verification is really a big deal, because that does provide verification that the work was done. It provides protection for the consumer, and it provides protection for the insurance department or whoever's holding the program. Next slide, please. Kind of revisiting consumer incentives, we've seen states offer wind premium discounts, and going back to the Alabama example, on the coast, especially in the only two counties we have in Alabama that are using the hurricane standard, hurricane fortified standard, the wind portion of their overall premium can be as much as 80% of the cost of insurance. And discounts can be as deep as 50%. So when you're able to save 50% of that wind premium portion, that is a big deal. That's a good bit of money. So the grants typically sometimes aren't enough incentive. But when you couple that with wind premium discounts or discounts on the premium, you really start seeing people take notice of that, especially those that are paying extremely high premiums. Just to kind of give you an idea of the premium amounts that we're seeing on the coast, on some of the barrier islands, you're talking, $30,000 to $60,000 a year for insurance. So when you're able to reduce that can be a significant savings. Other incentives or motivations, I call them, in addition to having, say, your premium discounts, we're also seeing states adopt things like roof endorsements, and what that would be is, if you're waiting on a grant, or you decide that you may not want to get a grant right now for whatever reason, you can purchase for some amount of money from an insurer an endorsement that would allow you to receive a fortified roof if you have to do a roof replacement. And we've seen many states adopt this. The average cost is somewhere around $100 to $120 a year for that roof endorsement, and it's been very effective. And we saw a very high take-up rate of that. Some states are requiring upgrades of materials that actually kind of overlap other mitigation programs. We're seeing in the West, where like Class A shingle roofs, which is required for IBHS's fortified program, also work as a fire barrier. It's also part of a wildfire program that IBHS has established. So we're starting to see those types of things happen. And then also another thing would be to offer deep education programs for folks that go through the program that may be peril specific, such as flood and earthquake. And if I'm not mistaken, I think that Connecticut was very interested in looking at the flood. What it does is it creates a base of knowledge for homeowners, and then also it kind of lays the groundwork for expanding programs into other perils. So thank you for allowing me to speak for a few minutes today. And I think the next slide just basically shows our contact information, and there's a QR code there if you want to learn more about the work that we do. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to any of our team members here, or reach out to the CIPR through that QR code, and we'll be more than happy to answer your questions.
Well, thank you, Brian, for that presentation. Although we had our technical issues, it was really informative, and we appreciate it. What we're going to do now is move to our next presentation by Susan Asmus, the SVP Regulatory Affairs for the National Association of Home Builders. So if Susan, you could give your presentation. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. Can you see my presentation?
Yes, we can.
I never know what I'm supposed to look at, so I'm the least technical person there is. So thank you for your time today. I appreciate the invite, and I appreciate the work that you all have already put into this. So I'm not sure that I'm going to share anything necessarily new or different. but maybe emphasize some of the programs and some of the points that some of the earlier speakers have made. I think initially, I represent the National Association of Home Builders. We are a nationwide trade association representing 140,000 members. Almost 1,000 of those are in Connecticut. We are aimed at providing advocacy, education, networking, other opportunities to home builders and their affiliates and associates across the country. And so really working with the federal agencies to, excuse me, as well as state and locals to pass good policies and make it easier and more affordable for our members to provide the housing that is desperately needed across the country. Just very quickly, we work on a full range of issues, but I thought it was important just to talk about briefly the housing shortage, obviously a big issue across the country, as well as housing attainability. And that's really the affordability, the opportunity for consumers to get into that first house and then into the move-up houses as they're able to do that. And as everybody has talked about today, the availability of affordable insurance. These are all tied to what we are talking about today. Excuse me. NHB is also the parent company to the Home Innovation Research Center. Now, the Home Innovation Research Center, I raise this simply because it's a good source of information. They are a full-service market research, technical research, product testing, third-party certification agency dedicated to the home building industry. So a couple of examples of what they've done. So if you have not seen these, I would strongly recommend that you go and take a look at the HUD Resilience Guidelines. These are guidelines that were developed by Home Innovation for HUD for the purpose of looking at how can the world take reasonable steps to make new housing more resilient. And it's divided into 5 different perils: wind, water, earth. I don't remember what the others are, but definitely worth taking a look at. The Home Innovation is also the Secretariat for the National Green Building Standard. This is an above code voluntary sustainability and green building. If members want to go above and beyond, which many of our members do, they can use that standard as well as the third-party certification to set themselves apart in the marketplace. And then finally, the survey of consumer interest in resiliency. Again, this is just an example of the type of work that they can do to see, what's on consumers' minds, what are they willing to pay for, not willing to pay for, what would they like most, not like most, so on and so forth. So what does the housing look like in Connecticut? This is simply to let you know, in Connecticut, we've got about 2,000 new houses are built per year. Excuse me, that's been pretty steady for the last 15 years. Expected to continue along that trajectory, excuse me, for the foreseeable future. And then we look at the existing housing stock. So within the existing housing stock, I think it's important for this discussion that we look at when those houses were built. As you can see, a very small percentage is built every year. You go back and obviously, this isn't a surprise to anybody. Most of the single family owner occupied, let's be clear about that, houses in Connecticut were built 65 years ago. So that's kind of telling. And that gives us some indication of what this program or the types of buildings this program might want to focus on. Excuse me. So post-disaster damage assessments, we know from several different sources that new construction built to modern codes is resilient. FEMA has found this through their mitigation assessment team reports. This is when, after a disaster, they go out into the field and take a look and really deep dive into, excuse me, into what happened, what type of damage was incurred, what types of buildings were damaged and those kinds of things. And they repeatedly come back and say, newer construction built to modern codes fares well. Similarly, IBHS, CoreLogic, and then the final one, Texas A&M. NHB had a Texas A&M do a study for us after Hurricanes Irma and Harvey. Again, just trying to get a sense of what types of damage was seen most often and what age of housing stock was impacted most often. So beyond that, as I said earlier, builders often voluntarily build above code, either because their consumers want it, their markets are asking for it, they want to set themselves apart and build a different tier of housing. And then in Connecticut, as you all know, the building codes are very resilient. IBHS does a regular study on all the states and where they rate their building codes. Connecticut, a score of 90 out of 100. So then we look and obviously, again, the existing housing stock is most vulnerable to damage. It's not built to the more stringent codes, typically used less resilient materials, deferred or no maintenance. And this is just a graph from that study about Hurricanes Irma and Harvey. This is in Texas, and you can see from the graph just, which types of housing saw the most wind damage to the to the roof as a result of that hurricane. Just again, demonstrating that it's the older housing stock that typically sees the brunt of the damage. So this whole discussion is about resiliency upgrades and, what are people doing? What should they be doing? Resiliency has not been a word. I've been at NHB for a very long time. I didn't really introduce myself. So I'm in charge of all of our regulatory affairs. But my special project is I'm also the main staff person to our climate risk committee, which means I am paying attention to kind of everything that's going on over at FEMA, all this climate change, sea level rise, the endangerment finding, all these crazy things that are going on related to resiliency, and then also working with our members to see kind of what are you doing in that space, what needs to happen in that space, what should NHB be for or against, support or not in that space. And so one of the things that we found, and again, this is over, the past 10 years or so, is most home buyers, homeowners aren't looking, or let's go back 10 years, weren't looking at resiliency at all. This is only just starting to kind of creep into the lexicon. Hurricanes Katrina and Sandy were kind of the big events that made everybody say, hey, wait a minute, we need to do a better job. How do we do this? And most of the actions there were based on community-wide, statewide. We're going to change our building codes. We're going to take a look at our response plans. What are we going to do post-disaster, making sure that we're all prepared. And any talk about the resiliency of individual homes really wasn't in the mainstream. They're like, yeah, that's all part of this larger effort. And so now, as we're talking about this grant program, as Brian was saying, the Alabama program about 10 years ago, well, no, we really need to be talking about individual homes as well as communities. And so because it's just really starting to show up, at least in a broad fashion, excuse me, there isn't a lot of history there. And so in my experience, I equated a little bit to the green building and the sustainability issue that arose about 20 years ago. And people said, well, we should build things more sustainably. We should be more conscious of the impacts of our actions on the environment. Resiliency is, in my mind, where green building was, 15 years ago. And so now we're turning to resiliency, and resiliency to most people is not only the ability to withstand storms and events, but also kind of that green and sustainability component. Excuse me. So now that it's just coming into play, again, as Brian indicated, there are some success stories. There are a number of states that are still in the planning stages, starting implementation of these resiliency upgrade programs. But really, with the increasing number of storms, the increasing interest in mitigation, and the ongoing insurance challenges, at least from the building side of things, we're really seeing more opportunities. Not only what can states do, but also what can builders do, and how can we be part of that? Excuse me. How can we be part of that solution? So with the National Association of Home Builders, we're putting together a resiliency upgrade wish list. What would be on it? And so the first thing is, tied to the risks that are reasonably expected to occur. And this is something we hear quite often in the building code arena. And if you're following the building codes, they are some of the components of building codes, of the model building codes, are based on climate zones. And so, like climate zones, there's kind of risk zones or earthquake zones and hurricane zones and things like that. And so we want to make sure that any program really ties to the risks that are reasonably expected to occur in that area. Clearly, you're currently thinking about the wind risk, and I think that's a smart move. And there are other risks in Connecticut that need to be addressed, but the most immediate and the most likely seems to be the wind. Second issue is voluntary. I can't overstress the need for let the market decide how this needs to happen, and let the market play that role as we put more and more mandates on the building community on requirements, say at the time of property transfer. You're just creating a real bottleneck that most of the time it's the consumers that can't get through that bottleneck. As I said earlier, the state of Connecticut building code is already very resilient. So I don't think that making changes to that make a lot of sense, particularly when you're talking about what's the best bang for the buck. So that gets to the third point, is focusing on the existing housing stock. The existing housing stock is more vulnerable and needs those upgrades, and that's really where you're going to get the biggest increase in resilience for the resources and the money that you might pay into a grant program, an insurance program, whatever program you decide, to implement. Compatible with standard construction practices. This is basically, don't create some new idea that I think this works because I saw it in a cartoon kind of thing. It's really what can we add on that's complementary to the existing building code or the existing construction practices that we're already following that can add some extra level of protection versus creating some brand new and wholly different solution that just won't work. Uncertainties associated with existing buildings. So I have spent a lot of time with our remodelers talking primarily about post-disaster mitigation and how do we clean up after disasters. But that always gets into a larger conversation about what do we do pre-disaster. And one thing that always comes up is when a remodeler goes into a house, into an existing structure, they have no idea what they're going to find. And so, yes, they've done it a million times, all those kinds of things. And so they know what to look for, but there's always some surprise in that process. And so with whatever program you're thinking about, you need to remember that there are lots of unknowns when you walk into that existing structure. Has it had, is it still the original structure from 1966, or has work been done? if work had been done, was that by a responsible contractor, or was it the homeowner that didn't really know what he or she was doing and made some patches? All of those things need to be factored in, and some kind of outlet or some kind of recognition that there might be these uncertainties, and how will those be impacted by the program, or how can the program anticipate those kinds of uncertainties, so that when they do happen, it's not a surprise and there's a protocol to follow to address those uncertainties. Clear criteria for participation. You either meet it or you don't. There's no gray area. I know it's easier said than done, but there need to be parameters that people can have that certainty and know that, you know, if I do these X number of things, I'm a good candidate. There are still going to be decisions made. There are still going to be, you know, opportunities to make determinations. But as long as both builders and homeowners know, you know, I need to do these 5 things. Don't then show up and say, oh, well, you need these 2 more. No, you're either in or out. Easy to participate and administer. So this goes to homeowners, builders, as well as whomever is running the program. It's got to be something that doesn't have a lot of barriers to entry for contractors, for example. So again, in a perfect world, not a lot of education requirements or paperwork requirements or re-upping your certifications, or again, for homeowners, you know, 14 copies of this or that or the other thing. And that kind of goes back to the prior one, is, you know, clear requirements for participation, and, you know, not having to dig through, you know, 20 years of tax bills or something like that to submit to demonstrate that, yes, you own the property and yes, you've lived there, things like that. So just a couple more on my wish list. And again, people have talked about most of the insurance side of things. We have seen, again, talking to consumers and looking at the surveys, that tie to insurance and that insurance discount is far and away more valuable than the grant, because the insurance discount is kind of not forever, but it's an ongoing benefit that they will see every time they make that insurance payment. The other issue that, you know, I think is worth looking into is the appraisal side of things. And so I don't know how things happen in Connecticut. Appraisals or appraisal standards are determined at the state level. And so in Connecticut, you can make your appraisers, you know, follow whatever protocols you would like them to follow. But putting that value of that upgrade, demonstrating that, showing it within the appraisal documents, gives the homeowner another reason to take this action. And so if I put $10,000 into something and I don't see a benefit other than I'm not getting rained on when I'm sitting in my living room, which is a benefit, it's harder to convince a homeowner to take that step. And so I think with the roofs, it's a little bit different, because I'm guessing what you're thinking is that, you know, the program would sort of kind of kick in at the time of re-roof. You know, I'm not going to wake up one morning and say, hey, I need a new roof. But after I realize that, you know, some of the shingles are not looking so great, and I know that my roof is 13 years old, I might say, yeah, I need a new roof. And so it's a little bit different because it's more tied to a need versus a want. But again, it's finding those other ways to demonstrate and recognize that the value of that upgrade that will be valuable to your homeowners. properly funded. Brian talked about a couple of different options, as well as did your working group on funding. So I don't think I have to go there. Payments direct to contractor. Again, this is just another kind of a small step or a small piece of any grant program. It just eliminates another middleman, right? I mean, if you've gone through all of the paperwork and demonstrated that the work has gotten done properly, it's an easy way to just make sure. So the contractor has the assurance that they are going to get paid, and the homeowner doesn't have to worry about it. And then the final one is support and resources to help sell to consumers. Again, your group on communication talked about this a little bit, but I think at the end of the day, your contractors are going to be some of your best ambassadors for the program. And so once they've done it a couple of times and they've got the pattern down of how do I best sell this, I think that will leave you in a good place. A couple of other considerations, and I touched on this a little bit, is the homeowner's ability and willingness to pay. And so if it is true that the average new roof costs $15,000 and say the grant is $10,000, there's a $5,000 gap that somebody's got to come up with. And so this is from a survey that we had a Home Innovations Research Lab do in 2019. And they said, how much are you willing to pay extra beyond existing code to make your home more resilient? And you can see.
Susan, so sorry,
Yeah.
this is Rob.
Yeah.
We're just running short on time, so we're
Yeah.
hoping that, if you could wrap in the next couple of minutes. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. So willingness to pay, here's one look at it, here's another look at it. As you can see, people want their granite countertops more than they want their resilient home. So it's just a thing to think about as you're putting together your communication strategy, is how do you get over that hump? Talking about the certification, I know that Brian said that they didn't think that there would be a problem providing enough inspectors. The cost of the inspection, the expected timeline, how long do you have to wait? Again, just things to think about. And one of the other things is think about the small steps. And again, somebody said something about the tree removal. Could that be something that might be included in the grant or things like that? And I think those smaller steps can be really meaningful, if not necessarily to reduce damage, but to send a message. And so thinking about how do you incorporate those things and recognize them, maybe not with money, but recognize that those are important pieces of the puzzle, as well as community-wide opportunities and efforts to really look at the community as a whole and say, demonstrate that the community is in on this. We're not just expecting each individual homeowner to take steps. And then adaptability, how do you define success? How do you evaluate future needs? What is the feedback loop? What is the way to make tweaks in the future? So again, overall, be clear what you're trying to do, for whom, how you're going to do it. Create a program that can be effective using existing resources. I see this all the time. People have great ideas. We're going to do this great program that's going to change the world, and it's going to cost $5 million, but we only have $1 million and one person to do it. And so just be mindful of, reality and how the program's going to work there. And again, bottom line, there's no need to reinvent the wheel. There are several programs out there that have demonstrated to be successful, workable, seem to hit the mark. And I wish you all the best of luck. But let me say one other thing. I'm really impressed with the work that you've done thus far. I appreciate being part of this and asked to take a look at what's going on, but really taking the time to make the right program for you is what's the most important thing here. So thank you for that.
Susan, thank you very much for this informative presentation, and it really brings to us the need to tie in outside organizations, especially the builders, home remodelers in the state of Connecticut and nationally. Next, joining us today is the one organization that is there for Americans at every natural disaster in this country, and that is the American Red Cross. You're with us all the time, no matter what the obstacles are. And we have today John Basso, who is the Senior Community Disaster Program Manager for the American Red Cross. He's a disaster management expert with over 12 years of experience leading volunteer-driven programs for the American Red Cross. And John, I'm going to let you take the floor.
Thank you and good afternoon. I've had the privilege of not only responding to local floods, tornadoes, and other disasters, and a lot of home fires, more than I can mention, but able to go around the country to wildfires and countless hurricanes, and been to Florida and Louisiana more times than I want to. But I'm going to try to humanize it and talk about what we're talking about today, which is the impact on people. So we've all seen how disasters are happening more often. They're happening with greater intensity, and they're making it harder for families and communities to recover. And it's not a question of if, it's a question of when. Record-breaking storms, such as last year's historic 1,000-year flood in western Connecticut, wildfires, straight-line winds, microbursts, and tornadoes are occurring with increasing frequency. We tend to track these impacts in the billions of dollars of cost, but we forget about the human toll. Hurricane Sandy hit Connecticut only as a tropical storm, yet neighborhoods took years to recover from the damaging winds and flooding. Last year, Hurricane Milton, only a Category 3 storm when it hit Florida, caused destruction days before its landfall, tearing apart homes and infrastructure. Then flooding and more damaging winds, including nearly 50 tornadoes, followed across the entire state. If a storm like Milton were to hit Connecticut, that impact would be catastrophic. And it's not a question of if, it's a question of when. Many families struggle to recover between disasters, never fully rebuilding before the next storm hits. I recently met a family in Florida in one of our shelters, a grandmother, a mother, and 2 children, and they had been displaced from a prior storm. They were hit by a second storm and had to seek shelter in one of our Red Cross shelters. They're still trying to rebuild, and so they're impacted by that second storm. Red Cross is seeing families, by and large, staying longer in our shelters for extended periods of time, and they're unable to find stable housing. Disasters don't just damage homes, they also disrupt communities. Small businesses, including local markets and pharmacies, are forced to shut down, cutting off essential resources to vulnerable families. When these businesses struggle to reopen, the community's ability to recover weakens. In fact, many of these businesses never reopen. The financial reality of these disasters is devastating. Many families don't have the savings to endure recovery costs. Lower income households face impossible decisions. Do I pay for food or do I pay to fix my home? Do I live in an unsafe condition or try to rebuild? The cycle of displacement leaves families stuck, unable to fully recover. In fact, many of these households lacked adequate insurance or have no insurance cover whatsoever. When small businesses disappear after a disaster, families lose access to essential services, making survival even harder. Health, housing, and hunger are interdependent variables. Disasters just don't damage homes, they fracture communities. For Connecticut, it's not a question of if, it's a question of when. Flooding and wind damage will continue to threaten homes, families, and communities. We need stronger, fortified homes to reduce the long-term displacement. We need to prepare our communities with education and training to be more resilient. And recovery efforts must focus on families to rebuild quickly before that next disaster forces them to start all over again. Stronger homes, resilient communities, and access to critical services will be the key to ensuring families can recover faster. Thank you.
John, thank you. And I think you hit on all the points that we on this advisory council and Commissioner Mays and his staff are concerned about, and that is resiliency, mitigation, and making sure that we protect consumers. So thank you and the American Red Cross very much. We appreciate your assistance. We'd like to open it up now for any public comments. Anyone in the room or anyone virtually who'd like to comment on today's information.
And the department can confirm there's no one online waiting to make public comment.
Thank you. You want to go?
So just with some closing comments, again, thank you to Commissioner Mays for his opening and stirring comments earlier. This is a very important time and subject for Connecticut in terms of what can we do now from a mitigation perspective to reduce the effects that you just heard from John from Red Cross, and again, thank you to Brian Powell and Susan Adams Asmus from the National Association of Home Builders for their also perspectives on this important topic. So again, what we're planning to do as a council here over the next several weeks is continue to listen, start to transition into forming some recommendations by the end of June. So these types of events and these types of meetings are really critical to get that public feedback and support for these types of measures. So thank you again to our council members for attending in person and those online. And I'll switch it back to you, Sona. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd also like to point out and a big thank you and a shout out to the Connecticut Department of Insurance staff. They're always behind the scenes, but they make this work. And we can't say enough in terms of a big thank you to all of you for the work that you do. The advisory council members, they have a real job that they do during the day, along with all the work that they do to help us formulate the direction and meet the mission that the commissioner has provided us. And I'd like to point out that the uniqueness of this council is that we have working people, but we have working parents. And many times we've been on calls, a team call, and someone leaves the call, jumps in their car and joins us again because they're headed out to childcare to pick up their children, or they're headed home because they have to meet a child at the bus stop, or even cook dinner for the family. So the commitment of this advisory council, the commitment of the Department of Insurance staff goes well beyond what one would expect. And I want to personally, because I'm the only retired person on this council, thank all of them for the double job and the double work that they do. With this, we're going to conclude our public meeting. We're still open if you want to write and send in comments to the department. We would love to hear from you. We want to hear about your thoughts about what we're attempting to do for the people of Connecticut. Thank you so much. And with that, folks, we have lunch sitting outside the room for you.